Second example, same job here to find the horizontal and vertical asymptotes of our function. This time we have an exponential involved. We have e to the x in both the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so to find our vertical asymptotes, if they exist, we need to know when does our denominator equal 0. So we're interested in when 7 plus e to the x is equal to 0. We have to think about this for a second. So in pre-calculus, you learned about e to the x. Okay, that was when you're studying functions and exponential functions. And if you recall, exponential functions are always positive. I'm going to draw a quick graph of e to the x right up here. Okay, there's my coordinate plane, and that's the graph of e to the x. Okay, very quickly drawn. Okay, that graph never touches the x-axis, and it never goes below the x-axis. So that graph is never equal to 0. It's always positive. That's just e to the x. All right, e to the x is always positive, and when you add 7 to it, just moves the whole graph 7 units up. So this denominator will always be positive. It's not possible for the denominator to equal 0. Right, so it cannot equal 0, and therefore there is no vertical asymptote for this function because there's no way for us to divide by 0. Okay. So no vertical asymptote, but what about the horizontal asymptotes? Well, we're going to do the same thing that we did before. Take the limit as x approaches infinity and negative infinity. So let's start off with negative infinity for this one. The limit as x approaches negative infinity of our function. All right. So we're going to plug in a really, really small value, like -1,000,000, into x. All right. So we're going to put it here, and we're going to put it there. All right. So in our numerator, we are looking at something like 4 minus e to the negative. I'm just going to make it -1,000. Okay. And in the denominator, we have 7 plus e to the -1,000. Right? And again, while this may be hard to think about in terms of a computational aspect, let's look at it from the picture. We got the graph of e to the x right up here. Okay, we're interested when x is equal to -1,000, which is way down here. Well, what happens to the behavior of our function as we look further and further to the left? Yeah, the blue curve is getting closer and closer and closer to the x-axis. In other words, the function is getting closer and closer to 0. Okay, it's not actually 0, it'll be 0.00000001, something like that, but it's very, very close to 0. And it's so close to 0 that we can treat it as 0. All right, so what ends up happening here is this turns out to be 4 minus 0 over 7 plus 0. For a final answer of 4 over 7. So that is going to be one of our horizontal asymptotes. Y equals 4 over 7. But the question is, how about from the limit as x approaches positive infinity, if we look at the other end? Because with positive infinity, e to the x is skyrocketing up. It's not leveling off. We don't have any kind of horizontal asymptote going. So what's happening now? So if we look at the limit as x approaches positive infinity of our function, so 4 minus e to the x over 7 plus e to the x. Okay, now the 4 and the 7 are going to be almost inconsequential. Okay, what's happening here is we have e to the 1,000. That is an enormous number. If you have e to the $1,000, okay, and you're walking down the street, you really don't care if $7 falls out of your pocket. Okay, that's nothing. So the 7 doesn't matter at all. We have this huge number in the denominator. But we also have this huge number in the numerator. Right, because that numerator also has an e to the x. And so they are both growing, and yet the 4 and the 7 are not. So the 4 and the 7 basically get wiped out. Where they were very important before when the exponential terms were leading towards 0, now the 4 and the 7 are useless to our problem, and we're interested in the e terms. Well, this behavior in the numerator and the denominator is basically the same. So that in essence, they're wiping each other out. And what we just need to look at is what kind of product is involved. In the same manner that we had the 3 and the 1 right here, we're looking at the coefficients of our exponential term in the numerator and our exponential term in the denominator. We see this is the opposite of e to the x, and this is positive e to the x. So what ends up happening is we have a -1 in the numerator because of that negative sign right there, And then we have a positive 1 in the denominator because of that sign right there. So our other horizontal asymptote will occur at y equals -1. So while this function has no vertical asymptote, it does have 2 horizontal asymptotes. We have to take a look at the limit from as x approaches positive infinity and the limit as x approaches negative infinity.